welcome to my mini documentary on toxic crimes. Today, we're going to be discussing the ghost of Guinea, United States and Norway's toxic waste crimes. From Koko in Nigeria to Kassa Island in Guinea-Conakry, a trend or pattern seems to be emerging, and that is the culture of non-disclosure. In 1988, about 15,000 tons of incinerator ash from Philadelphia, United States, was dumped on Kassa Island, a resort island off the coast of Conakry, Guinea. The shipment was handled by a Norwegian company, Bulk Handling, using a Norwegian registered vessel. The ash was declared or labeled as raw materials for bricks, a false description that exposed a transnational hazardous waste linking the United States and Europe. The case ended with the arrest of a Norwegian diplomatic officer implicated in the forging of the import license, which enabled the importation of the toxic ash. The cargo consisted of approximately 15,000 tons of municipal incinerator ash from Philadelphia. The ash reportedly contained heavy metals such as lead, cadmium, chromium, and dioxin precursors, all known or probable human carcinogens. Reports from Guinea authorities and residents discovered large volumes of ash dumped in an abandoned quarry on Kassa Island. Investigators found that the ash was mislabeled and that import documents had been forged. The Norwegian honorary consul, identified as a key figure in the company that arranged the shipment, was charged with forging documents. Analysis of the case showed that the export of United States municipal incinerator ash to West African countries such as Guinea was part of a larger pattern of transnational hazardous waste transfers from developed economies to emerging economies such as those on the African continent. Media reports from the time described withered vegetation around the dump site and concerns about the leaching of toxic substances into the environment. While detailed long-term monitoring data appears scarce in public domain, scientific literature on such waste and ash indicate that heavy metals and dioxin-type compounds pose chronic health risk and can bioaccumulate. The good thing that came out of this incident, however, is that like the incident in Koko, Nigeria, this incident resulted in global policy reform at the global level, national, and also continental level. Specifically, the Guinean government halted further imports and prosecuted those involved in the crime, whilst the Norwegian government agreed to pick up 15,000 tons of toxic incinerator waste that the Norwegian company had dumped. The Kassa Island case, alongside the incident in Koko, Nigeria, and Benin Republic, which I will talk about in another episode, accelerated the adoption of the Basel Convention of 1989, which regulates the transboundary movement of hazardous waste. In response to the loopholes in the Basel Convention, African states negotiated the Bamako Convention of 1991, which bans the import of hazardous waste in its entirety. Ironically, like Nigeria, which is signatory to the Bamako Convention. Guinea is also signatory to the Bamako Convention, but is yet to ratify or deposit the convention. Regrettably, as this case demonstrates, policies of non-disclosure and deceptive labeling have enabled wealthier nations to exploit African states as dumping grounds for hazardous waste historically. However, then as now, this seems to be a continuing trend, as scholars have described this deliberate targeting of African communities as a form of environmental racism. In fact, in 2020, I, alongside a colleague, published a paper that looked at toxic waste dumping as a form of environmental racism in Africa. Other scholars have termed this kind of incident as a form of toxic colonialism, and some have explicitly used the term toxic terrorism to capture the intentional harm caused by these practices. At the same time, enforcement bodies such as the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime increasingly classify these incidents as a form of waste trafficking, recognizing them as illegal and highly exploitative transnational crimes. From sea to shore, the environmental and human implications of this sort of incidents are profound and long-lasting. But the question that begs for an answer remains, are this kind of incidents historical, or are they continuing in present time, but in a different form? Join me in the next episode when I look at examples from Benin Republic, Equatorial Guinea, and Guinea-Bissau, other coastal states on the African continent entangled in the global toxic waste trade. Thank you so much, and take care.